Hello and welcome back to E.G. the Virgo. I wanted to jump right into our next story, which is our actual next chapter, which is chapter 4, Tomboy Tag Along. But first, let's do our normal routine to make sure we are protected from any infringement or copyright concerns. So, okay, this is volume 1 of many, which is why I gave it a new title or an added title because of the volumes. It will be more than volume 1, but right now we're working on volume 1. So because it's going to be volumes, the new name of the title of the volumes is One Life, Five Generations. The name of the documentary and story is An Unusual Kind, That 1%. And this is based on actual experiences and theories. This story includes entertaining fictional, non-fictional images, animations, videos, and music by artists and photographers unrelated and in no way were created for this particular story. Some names, dates, and times were changed to protect the privacy and identities of the characters within this story. Again, this is volume 1. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. This source is from Circular 92, Copyright Law of the USC 17, Section 107. Okay, jumping right into things. Again, this is Chapter 4, Tomboy Tag Along. And of course, we're going to jump ahead in life from Chapter 3, where E was born, the main character was born. And we're going to jump right into the age of 5. Now, not that we're figuring, not that we say any of the miles, every year of the milestone is not important, but we want to focus on these particular milestones that kind of stand out with the 1%ers. And that's what I mean when I say the 1%ers, because they are no different than anyone else, but there are certain things that go on in life with them that, people just can't seem to understand, or there's no explanation for it. And which also kind of correlates with everything prior to Chapter 4 as to why this documentary story is being done. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. At the age of 5, E and her family moved to Wilmington, Delaware in an apartment building, and where E loved playing with her brother, who was 8 years old at the time. Not only was E's brother the closest in age to her, but he was also the closest person she could childishly communicate to and play with. E and her brother were the youngest of 4. E's older sisters were 8 years older than her and 5 years older than her brother. So it was natural that the 2 youngest children would form a bond, and the 2 older sisters, who were only a year apart in age from one another, would form a bond. But all 4 of them loved each other very much and behaved towards one another like any normal set of siblings would. They would playfully tease, agitate, wrestle, or argue with one another. They would also tease and help each other out whenever needed. But E was the youngest, and she was the tomboy of the family. E was very energetic, physically strong, tough, fit, athletic, curious, ambitious, daring, fair, friendly, nonviolent, busy, smart, and sometimes slightly competitive. Being the youngest and smallest of her siblings, E also didn't handle losing very well in sports and other activities, like any other normal sibling, or the youngest who was slightly a little bit more spoiled, so we say. And that is just an allege, because not all the youngest are always the most spoiled. But like most, she and others will, eventually grow out of their character of being a poor sport. Because she wasn't the only one of her siblings who was a poor sport. So, but they could handle it better, and they were growing out of it just like she was. And additionally, E was slightly tall for her age at the time. But most of all, E really enjoyed playing with her brother and his friends more than she liked playing with her own little girlfriends, because the boys did more daring and exciting activities than the girls. And those were the sort of activities E really enjoyed doing. E's brother sometimes didn't want E tagging along with him and his friends, because he knew that meant he would have to keep an eye out for his little sister, and probably couldn't enjoy himself with his friends as much as he would like. So, on the days E's brother would reject her tagging along with him and his friends because her little friends weren't out and about, or possibly they were somewhere off with their families, that would leave E with no one else to play with except for her brother. E would tell their mom or mother he wouldn't allow for her to tag along with him. And like any good, caring, and fair, loving, understanding mother, she explained to E's brother that E didn't have anyone else to play with at the time, and to please allow E to tag along just for a little while until E's friends came outside to play or returned home. E's brother would reluctantly agree. Because E's mother knew E very well, she would firmly tell E she had to listen to her brother, not wander off alone and without telling her brother where she was or going. And if she got a bad report on E by E's brother, she wouldn't be able to ever tag along with E again. With her brother again. So, with that being said, E would listen to their mother's instructions, give her mother a great big hug, smile, and happily agree. On this particular day, which was a bright, clear, warm summer Saturday morning before the sun grew to becoming much hotter in the afternoon, E, her brother, and his friend all left to head for a construction building site in the city of Wilmington. It was a site that would eventually become another apartment building about 1 block away from where E and her family lived, and would later, unbeknownst to E, become the home to one of E's best friends. The kids always found amazing things at construction sites. Things like different shaped and colored rocks and stones, small old pipes of some sort, interesting dirt mounds, different kinds of dirt and mud like red clay, different sized water puddles, and also big holes that were dug out by heavy construction machinery. Sometimes the kids would even find money that may have been accidentally dropped by the construction workers during the weekdays when the construction workers were working. While E's brother and his friend amused themselves with throwing rocks at a huge pipe laying on the ground, E went around collecting red clay to take home so she could later make her mother a turtle or an ashtray for the adult guests who would sometimes visit E's mother's at home. Upon collecting red clay, he stumbled on a huge hole in the ground. It was one of the biggest holes dug out by the heavy construction machinery. E walked close to the very edge of this hole to look down inside to see how deep it was. Upon E looking down in the hole, she noticed it looked much deeper than she thought. She thought the size was absolutely amazing. To E, it looked like the Grand Canyon. E's eyes swept the entire circular inner hole. E turned towards the direction of her brother and yelled in excitement for her brother and his friend to come over and look at her amazing find. E then turned back to face the enormous size hole. However, in her amazement, E missed two important factors that were inside this approximate 30-foot deep, 80-foot wide hole. It had become clear to E that there were two teenage boys sitting at the bottom of the hole playing in the dirt together. Well, E stopped smiling and began staring at the two boys, wondering to herself what they were doing at the bottom of the hole and how they got down to the bottom of this deep hole. While E was still standing at the top on the edge of this hole, she turned away again to face the direction of her brother and then yelled in excitement again, but this time telling her brother there were two boys down at the bottom of the hole. When E's brother and his friend heard that, they excitedly rushed over, running towards E to see what she was talking about. As E was still standing on the edge of the hole with her back turned to the two teenage boys who were in the hole, she began waving her right arm and hand in the air, gesturing for her brother and his friend to hurry. While E's brother and his friend were already running over towards E, E's brother noticed one of the teen boys E was telling them about had come out of the hole just a few feet behind E, who hadn't even noticed that one of the teen boys had come out of the hole behind her. E's brother and his friend noticed something more terrifying about the teen who was behind E. He noticed the teen was carrying a big boulder rock, and at the same time, E's brother not only saw the big boulder rock the teen was carrying with two hands, but E's brother also saw the teen raising the rock, the big boulder rock, over his head, as if he were going to try to catapult the rock with all his might at E, who was standing just a few feet in front of him. E's brother and his friend came to a sliding stop, as you would slide into home base at a baseball game. Just a few feet from E, and in fear, the boys began yelling for E to hurry up and run towards them instead. E's brother could see E looked confused, as she was still standing by the edge of the hole and looking at her brother and his friend, who had stopped running towards her and began yelling in fear at E and frantically motioning for E to look behind her and run. E's brother knew he couldn't just run off and leave E alone, because not only did he love and care for his little sister, but he would have to face the wrath of their mother if he did. When E finally was able to make out what her brother and his friend were saying, E quickly looked behind her to see that one of the teen boys had come out of the hole carrying a big boulder with both hands raised over his head, who was now less than 7 feet from E and was walking towards her because the big boulder rock was too heavy for him to try and run with. E also noticed the teen boy was making deep, bellowing, moaning sounds as if he couldn't talk. E's brother and his friend could hear the sounds coming from the teen boy as well. Out of an even greater fear and concern for his little sister, E's brother took one more step towards E, with his right arm extended out towards her to make sure he would be able to grab E in time enough in order to save her from the teen boy, which left E's brother's friend, who briefly paused to wait for E and her brother to catch up, who was now in front of both E and her brother. The friend was closer to the direction they all would have to quickly run towards to get out of the construction site and away from the teen boy to head back home. As soon as E had taken notice to the teen boy behind her and displaying his cruel intentions with the rock being raised over his head, aimed and looking dead at E, E's body temperature felt like it dropped below zero. Her heart began pounding like never before. E's breathing turned to a panic breathing with quick, short breaths. Her facial expression clearly displayed serious fear. The hair on her head felt like it was tingling in her scalp, and E quickly jumped 1 foot away from the spot where she was standing towards her brother and began running as fast as she could, making a beeline towards the direction of her brother, who was still reaching out for her to grab his hand, along with his friend, who was still waiting for both E and her brother to catch up with him. E's long but slender legs were going so fast, she felt she wouldn't have time enough to run around huge construction pipes that were laying side by side. So E jumped up onto the pipes, which were laying in the path E was running, and she began running on top of the pipes, trying to reach her brother. The teen boy was still walking behind E in hopes of getting close enough to her so he could haul the big boulder rock at her that he was still carrying over his head as he continued making those strange moaning sounds. But just as E's speed increased, she stepped down in between one of the huge construction pipes that were laying side by side, and E's entire right foot became stuck and wedged between two of the pipes. E's brother, who was now also in full running motion, heading back towards his friend after seeing E would be able to catch up to them, heard E frantically yell out to him for help. E's brother and his friend stopped and looked back to notice E trying to wiggle her foot free from the two pipes, and the teen boy was now no more than about 8 feet from E, close enough to catapult the boulder at E and hit her. A boulder of that size and weight could kill someone as small as E was instantly, especially if it was to strike them on the head or torso. And it appeared the teen boy was intelligent enough to have also known that. And with all his might, he let out a loud roar and hurled the boulder at E without E even knowing he had actually thrown the boulder at her. However, E's brother and his friend could see everything from where they were standing, which was about 10 feet from where E was trapped. At this point, all E's brother and his friend could do was frantically stop running towards E and helplessly stand and watch as the boulder left the teen boy's hand, went up into the air, and was coming down right at E, aimed straight for her head. E's foot was firmly wedged between those two pipes pretty good, despite all of her pulling and wiggling efforts. Seconds before the boulder hit E's head. In amazement, E's brother and his friend actually witnessed E's foot mysteriously pop up and out of the pipes as if someone extremely powerful had moved one of the pipes ever so slightly, just enough, and pretty much just in time for E to free her foot. E made a forward leap into the air once her foot was somehow freed and quickly moved and continued running towards her brother and his friend about 1 second before the boulder came crashing down on the pipes exactly on the spot where E was trapped. Once E's brother and his friend saw E was free and was once again running towards them, they both turned and continued to run towards home, still about 10 feet in front of E. E could never outrun her brother and his friends, but this time a miracle happened. When E's foot was finally freed and she heard and felt the vibration of the boulder smashing down and hitting the pipes where her foot was trapped, E ran so fast towards her brother and his friend, who were also in full running mode. She literally ran past both of them with flying colors and made it back home seconds before her brother and his friend did. It was as if E was airlifted and carried to home base. As soon as E reached her apartment building, she flung open the building door so hard it slammed against the brick frame and then slammed back shut on its own. E then continued running without stopping and ran down the hallway, a 5-step staircase to their first-floor apartment door, turned the doorknob, frantically pushed open the apartment door, and without closing it, ran straight into the arms of her mother, who was standing near the kitchen, wondering about all the noise she was hearing in the apartment building hallway because of the building doors opening and slamming shut. Still breathing heavy in a panic, E tightly hugged her mother's waist for dear life and wouldn't let go. 1 second later, E's brother and his friend, both out of breath from running, followed behind E and also went straight to their mother as well. E's brother and his friend were frantically trying to tell their mother what happened, but all three of them were still trying to catch their breath and calm down long enough to explain in detail exactly what happened at the construction site. After E's mother got all the details, she contacted the local authorities and E's brother's friend's parents. The friend's parents came over to pick him up and take him home and wait at their house to hear back from E's mother about what the police might have said or found. When the police went out to the construction site, the two teen boys were gone. But the police did see the big boulder rock that was still laying on the pipes. So the police went around the local area asking anyone if they had seen any teen boys fitting the description they were given by E, her brother, and his friend. But it was to no avail. No one had seen the teen boys, and E, her brother, and his friend had never seen the teen boys again either. And E, her brother, and his friend never returned to that construction site again. After calming down from all the excitement, the next day E's brother, his friend, and his friend as well, E's mother, all sat in their living room and wondered as they recalled the detailed events of that whole entire scary and nerve-wracking situation the day before. How or what could have possibly moved those big heavy pipes just ever so slightly enough for Eve's foot to be set free so she could get away from that teen boy? The pipes were even too heavy for the police to budge or move when they had gone to the construction site to investigate and examine the pipes, the boulder rock, and look for the teen boys at the time. According to the police's written report, they also couldn't figure out and didn't know how it was even possible for E to have gotten her foot free from those big heavy pipes once her foot had become wedged between them. However, the police also had taken note of the two red bruises on each side of E's foot that was wedged between the pipes after E showed her mother and the police the day of the incident, because E had begun limping shortly after she made it back home that day. Additionally, E's mother, brother, and his friend also wondered how E had ever run so fast. She caught up with them, passed them, and then ran much faster than both her brother and his friend, who were pretty athletic themselves, in addition to them both also being 3 years older than E. Another thing is, they also wondered about the timing of everything, especially the timing of her foot being freed from being wedged in between those two solid, heavy concrete construction pipes versus the time the boulder rock was released from that teen boy's hands and hit and smashed onto the pipes where her foot was wedged. You talking about 1 second difference of her being able to get her foot out of there in time enough for her to leap forward away from the rock, where the rock would have hit, which she wasn't aware he had released it already. He had thrown it. She wasn't aware of it. She was just trying to get her foot out of there. And the rock coming down in the same exact spot where she was. And so you got to look at that timing. A 1, maybe at the most a 2 second difference. That's not much time. 1/1000, 2/1000, boom. You know, so you have to look at that timing as well. And again, these are things that make you think. You have to think about these things with the 1%ers, because our 1%ers somehow there are other things working in their favor. And we got to look at that. And for some reason, they are meant to make it to certain points in life, and nothing is going to stop that. And I believe that actually applies to every person who lives after birth. So without further ado, let's move on to the next page. So the next page is the end of chapter 4, Tomboy Tag Along. And we will pick up again with the chapter 5 of our story, which will be E's first guy friend. So, without further ado, I want you all to please enjoy this Memorial Day weekend. I hope you invite good friends and family over. Enjoy yourselves. Bring back the spirit of good barbecue days. You know, we seem to be losing that. The good barbecue days, you know, July 4th and Memorial's Day and Labor Day. What happened to those good barbecue days? Let's bring the spirit back, the energy back, and start having fun again. And pray that we have prosperity, and pray for our leaders as well, because a lot of them aren't very good, and it's really, you know, causing a lot of oppression and depression and stress, and they're really not good for the people that they are leaders of. So, and that doesn't mean just one leader. I'm talking about leaders in every different state and county, and city in this country. So please pray for your leaders, that they learn how to get along, and that they learn that prosperity is important and what's good for the people, not for themselves. And that's what we need to be praying for, and that we also need to pray for ourselves, that God continues to keep his hands on us in the name of Jesus and help us through this and shield us from all the wickedness that goes on in this world. Until then, my people and my viewers and readers, please have a blessed time.